Hi, once again, I'm Sydney, and I'm a servant of the Almighty God. I'm also the author of Humanity's Inflection Point. Pick up a copy if you can. And these are some of the principles that came to me and I use as guiding principles because they don't conflict with any of the commandments. God is generic, religion is brand. That's something I learned. But here are the messages. It's our science reveals God's methods. Our science reveals God's methods. The key to meeting God's expectation of us is self-control, and diversity is His. As servants, we must honor His diversity. All of this, I just went through that stuff because this has come, to me, it's coming to it has built into something that really is at a point where it can make a big difference. And this episode of Recognizing God's Omnipotence is about nature providing proof of God. So quickly, let me go back over to our sciences. Because that's where I've been a software engineer for a long time. I've worked on all the platforms. I understand, storing things, coding in different languages, all that stuff. And so for me, things have to be logical. And when this thing started coming to me years ago, these inspirations, I still had questions. But now I am preparing a paper which I'll put out there. So what it's about in nature providing proof of God. It has to do with something, again, that's obvious to all of us. But let me show you the inspiration, how we get there. Now, when we look out in nature, which I refer to as the manifestation of God's omnipotence, we see, wonderful things out there. But let's take one little step back and let's talk about knowledge. Knowledge, right? And so I think a very apt description of or definition of knowledge is usable information in accessible memory, right? Let's think about that. Usable information in accessible memory. Because whether we are taught or just by practice on our own, we've learned certain things, it becomes part of our knowledge. That must be stored in our memories. Because if it's not in our memory, we don't know how to do that stuff. We don't have knowledge of it, right? And so when we want to achieve something, we have to have that knowledge, but it must be first in our memory. Why is that so important? Because all around us, we can observe in nature the simple animals that have a lot of knowledge. They know how to perform tasks that are essential to prolonging their life and providing food, etc., etc. Ants have it, spiders have it, and when we talk about the couple of things that I go into, like the corolla spider, it digs that hole and it knows how to identify quartz crystals. You look at snakes. So especially it's more apparent when we look at the animals that have no parental education. They also do not have a written or vocal tradition of passing down information. The knowledge, therefore, must be stored somewhere in accessible memory. In that local animal, that information, that for it to be knowledge for that animal, it must be stored somewhere in memory. Think about that for a moment. Even within us, our autonomic systems, like our immune system that keep, and the system that keep our heart beating, all this information must be stored somewhere. It must be, because this system, every system relies on information. So when we see, for instance, this spider, like the bola spider, I'm putting up a little podcast on that. It does not spin the traditional web. It puts like threads, and it manufactures a synthetic sex pheromone of another animal to attract it because that's what it eats. It must have knowledge of how to spin a web. It must have knowledge of how to create this pheromone. That knowledge is not passed down. That knowledge is implanted, embedded from the source of all knowledge. This is the key. We must understand that within even the trees. I saw something recently about acacia trees in the Middle East. When animals start eating on it, it excretes ethylene, and the other trees know then to start building up this chemical within them that actually becomes harmful to the plant, to the animals. So you have the animals that are eating the tree. So in essence, you have communication, which shows intelligence. But that all starts with knowledge, which means that somewhere in memory, that information is stored and it is accessible. So all plants, all animals have knowledge. Now, we know that back in 1859, Charles Darwin found out about evolution. In 1869, and I like to talk about the synchronicity that we missed, because 10 years later, Dmitri Mendeleev received the periodic table of elements in a dream, a vision. That is the basis for all our chemistry, all our medicines, even our computing and all of this stuff, because we know which materials and the properties of materials. Also, in 1869, the same year as Dmitri Mendeleev received the periodic table of elements, we had this chemist, Friedrich Miescher, who found DNA, but he called it nuclein. He saw it in the nucleus of the white blood cell and says this is nuclein. In 1953, Crick and Watson found out about the double helix. But if we look at this, has been around forever. This is why I say all our sciences are journeys of discovery. So this information has been there forever. So we know DNA, and right now we attribute that to being the source of defining the physical attributes of all living things. But we don't know yet where is memory stored. Because it's not just the physical characteristics. When we're talking about a simple animal, and like I said, all animals, all plants, there is information stored. Now, in a complex, it seems like we have to learn this from our parents. We don't even know what to eat. The simple animals, they have probably a larger store of information, knowledge that is accessible to them for their survival. So this is the thing that what we see is maybe it's stored somewhere in DNA. Maybe it's stored somewhere else. And I like to relate that if we, as human beings, were able to access that memory, where memory is stored, we would never need a lie detector. Because we can just have someone, conscious or not, attach some leads to them, and just like you're watching this video, you can go back and forth. It's the same thing, because we would be accessing the memory within that person. So their entire life history, everything they experience, which is part of their memory, we would be able to access. Just think how powerful, and I mean, that's just that's beyond science fiction. But that sort of memory evidently must exist in every living thing, just like DNA. Like we have plant DNA, we have animal DNA. There must be somewhere that information can be stored. There must be some kind of memory that enables these all creatures to have knowledge. Knowledge being usable information stored in accessible memory. So when we think about whether it's an octopus, a wasp, a worm, a spider, a snake, they all have knowledge. And here is the kicker. Where is that knowledge coming from? So as I've been a software engineer for most of my adult life, I mean all my adult life is what I've done, I know about storing data on whether it's a mainframe, Unix systems, or Microsoft system. I know how to store data, but we have controllers and stuff to take care of that. But when you work on different platforms, you understand you have to know the format of the data and you store that data. So obviously, to be able to store appropriate, relevant data in trees, in plants, in all forms of life, plants and animals, you must have created this. You must have created the DNA, you must have created the memory, so you know the format of writing to that. Because, and like I said, the creator, it would be very simple. Probably can take plant DNA, and because you know the keys. I mean, if I wrote some code, I can destruct and say, no, I can use it for insurance, an insurance application, use aspects of it, and says, no, I'm working on, federal government, or anything, because that's the sort of thing. It's like any industry, for instance, again, like I said, wholesale, retail, insurance, something front end. I can do all of that stuff using the same code. I say, oh, I can use this part of it, use this part of it. So when you think about it from that standpoint, the creator of DNA could modify, say, I'll take this and do it, and suddenly what we have is an animal with any characteristics, because every characteristic of an animal is defined there. Similarly, the memory, the knowledge that has to be intrinsic to that animal. If I know this animal needs this, I can program, yes. And again, now we can understand that the processes involved in evolution, because, and you see, some of this information had to come out now, because now that we are doing AI, we can recognize that, yes, we don't need to be tweaking it at that code every. We build the code so that we have this database. It interrogates and says, when this happens, which is what AI is about, we must have a database that it interrogates. When this situation interrogates, what should I do with this and this? And think about designers. Someone who is so powerful designed DNA, which is in all life forms. Also designing the memory and placing intelligent code there so that we can have mutations. So this is where free will comes in. It does not have to be constantly manipulating that code. It's like, no, I'm so advanced. I built that code. So it knows that if this, change like this. Oh, this and this, you haven't encountered this. But if you encounter this, then look in your database. And so what I'm talking about there, it's intelligent mutation that we observe and we call evolution. So when I talk about 1859 and Charles Darwin, 1869 and the other discoveries or revelations to us, now this ties everything together, because what was missing was the knowledge that is stored, somewhere in memory. We don't know where that memory is. And just like some of the theories of Einstein and others, when we look at them, they're logical. The proof of this may come in time. It must come. We don't know whether it's in 5 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, because the memory thing, it's really very powerful. If we can tap into a plant that says, look, this is the memory that this plant has. This is how this plant will behave, because here is a database of all the options. Look at the logic that basically governs this thing. Even mutation. So I'm not sure we'll get quite there, but it is evident in everywhere in nature, the manifestation of God's omnipotence, that there is knowledge, which is information, usable information, embedded in the memory of all living things. This is why, like I said, bees know how to when they find food, get back here and communicate with the other bees. This is why hummingbirds know which flowers, birds know which plants. The moment we say know, we are referring to knowledge. Knowledge being usable information in accessible memory. It is not accessing a computer like, we can go and Google something and look at stuff. No, it's embedded in them from one source who knows exactly what to embed in every living creature, just like DNA. Every living species has a different, slightly different version of DNA. You know, different genes, different configurations. Similarly, the memory, the knowledge. And so nature is showing us that not only we have this common thing, DNA, but there is also information that is specific to every species embedded in there. So none of this could be random, because as we see, we observe any animal out there, they have very specific information that must have been embedded by an intelligent, benevolent creator. And this is the proof. We can't see the creator, but we can see the evidence of the creator everywhere in nature. So now as you go out there, and this must contribute to us being more God-fearing. I just got chills talking about it, because when you think about our creator being so powerful that he embeds that code, that specific knowledge into every living thing. Can you see how powerful? And now all of science must recognize, once we look at from the standpoint of recognizing that knowledge, which is undeniable. We cannot deny that the spider has knowledge. The butterfly has knowledge. And we just said, oh, nature give it. Well, that's true. The creator who created DNA, and we don't know when the memory is stored, but he also embedded not just some code that determines the physical characteristics, he also embedded the knowledge in somewhere in memory, so that each creature knows. Even like I said, our autonomic systems, our immune systems, we don't control it. There is knowledge of this is a foreign body. And so that it says, okay, when we encounter a foreign body, again, it knows this. So what we're seeing is that there is a source of a great and amazing source of knowledge that is benevolent and contributes to the existence of every system in our world. So I want you to think about this, and I'll put that paper out there because it's just kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and remind you that there's no coincidence here. It's a series of decisions that you've made that led you down this path. And this information is not just for me. I am thankful that I'm the one to bring it, because I had that crazy scientific and question everything. But I believe that it's for every individual living today and will be alive in the future. So thank you for taking the time to observe this, and until next time, may God bless us all. Thanks again.